Hello and welcome to the Sedex South Asia Conference. I'm Pritesh Chauhan, the Head of Community at Sedex. A final reminder for you is that you'll be able to watch back any of today's sessions from tomorrow on the same URL or the same link. So just come back here and check those out. Share any of the questions that you have for this session in the Q&A tab. You'll be able to visit the booths of our event exhibitors on the exhibitor tab and start your conversation with them. So this is a good chance if you've been wanting to do that and haven't quite got around to that. Same for event sponsors, catch up with them in the lounge. And anyone that you've heard or spoken to that you'd like to connect with, do that in the people tab. So just wanted to remind you of those things today. So onto our panel, rebuilding a resilient supply chain through support and collaboration. The COVID-19 crisis has exposed the lack of resilience in both organizations and societies, more specifically in global supply chains. There was a recent study by McKinsey on senior supply chain executives, and it suggests that 73% of them encountered problems in their supplier footprint that required changing, and over 93% plan to increase resilience over their supply chain. The impact on global supply chains was amplified due to the sheer complexity of a typical global consumer goods supply chain, involving millions of deliveries and thousands of suppliers. Operations leaders are scrambling to respond to the urgent questions about how to protect their employees, ensure supply security, mitigate the financial impact, address reputational risk, and navigate markets uncertainty. Throughout this session, you will hear how companies can work together and support and empower their suppliers to deliver great resilience across their supply chain. Moderating this session is Bex Hall, Principal Consultant at Sedex. Hi Bex, I'm gonna hand over to you now.
Hi Pritesh, thank you very much for that introduction. Hello everybody, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I am moderating this session, as Pritesh says. Building on what Pritesh has just said to introduce this session, I also would just like to add that obviously the COVID crisis has really highlighted and exacerbated any existing issues with resilience in supply chains. The last 2 years has been a real struggle for businesses in regards to supply chain and business operations, but it's also been very difficult personally for many people on this call. I'm sure you've gone through difficult times recently. So I'd like to just first of all say thank you so much for joining us today. And I sincerely hope that everyone joining us is well and is happy and recovering themselves. To turn to our panel today, we have two excellent guests who will be speaking to us about their experience in supply chain, building resilience and capacity. Sedex has existed for around 16 years, and we've worked with a variety of different organizations in that time, from businesses, both buying members and supplying members, to governments, NGOs, trade unions, the whole array of organizations. Today we have, as I say, two speakers representing two different organisations who would like to speak to you about their experiences and present some case studies. So to turn to our speakers, our first speaker today is Chetan Sambole. He is joining us from the Maharashtra Chamber of Commerce, Industries and Agriculture, where he is the head of the sustainability desk. To go through his biography, to introduce him a little better, in that role, Chetan leads the team. He coordinates technical activities and provides thoughtful sustainability actions for industries. His focus areas are challenges and solutions around sustainable development within SMEs, so small, medium enterprises, and within the supply chain. Chetan also has over 16 years of experience working in this area, so sustainable development and ESG. He also looks at business economy, climate and societal resilience, and net zero economy. Chetan also has a lot of experience looking at technology and how that fits into this ecosystem in terms of supply chain resilience and sustainable development as a whole. We're really pleased to have you, Chetan. I'd like to pass over to you now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Bex, and thank you, Pritesh. I am really hopeful for a nice discussion. We have, I guess, might be a lot of participants are, interested in. They might have enjoyed already the previous session, but they might be, more interested on, knowing something about the actions on the ground. and they may would like to hear something on some success stories and case studies, because being an expert, and I have assessed more than around 180 organizations so far. So there is a great, the learnings from the supply chain itself, because every industry and organizations falls under, the someone's supply, and they also have some, their own supply chain. So I'll straight away start with one of the case study. But before that, I would like to mention here the background before, the behind that case study. If because everyone thinks a great supply chain to have, and everyone talks about the cost reduction, on many fronts, and managing the smooth, the supplies and delivering the goods normally, because someone goods is for someone, raw materials is always there. So the procurement department has a key role, and at the same time the logistic management, it's quite critical uh, to to manage the inventories, and at the same time to manage the pricing, the markets start fluctuating. So if so there are around 4 key elements that I would like to brought in for the supply chain. The first one is, of course, uh, the communication. The communication becomes very, very strong element. The second one is the brand promotion. It is something very different, and the brand promotion has nothing to do with, someone may feel that that has nothing to do with the supply chain, but believe me, that is very, very important part nowadays, because every 5 years you have to rebuild the supply chain of your own. And whether it is medium scale or it is a big profile industry, they have to, reinvent or relook at their wheel the entirely. And then that is how they streamline their, the current performance, and at the same time the future programs for the management of the entire value chain. uh, the third, of course, the element is uh, mm, uh, relationship. That's very, very important. And then the fourth and the final one is the conversion. The conversion supply chain is all about the conversion. It happens at every stage, everywhere, wherever the goods or the services are, on the line, from start to end. Basically, for that case study, because I have just recently, worked with one of the medium scale organization, and that organization, that industry is supplying to the big profile industry, and that big profile industry has got already a supply chain very resilient plan for not only the one tier, or the one the third level, the vendors. But now, this being this guy as a the one first year organization, he was not, you know uh, he was lacking on so many fronts, dealing with the daily dispatches, and at the same time getting the supplies from his own suppliers. So we started, working on the ESG parameters of their, because that guy was literally struggling on the bottom line, and then top line was like, out of the scope, and the leaders were more on focusing on only just delivering the quality goods, the quality products at the right time. And that is where the struggle is, because that industry had a, the has been working from operating from 4 locations, 5 locations in India, and supplying almost, the market their product. So it's a huge, right? So supply chain becomes very, very important. So what we started is, we started with these 4 elements. I approached them, and we have strategically worked on the past data of the logistic first. And then at the same time, the procurement. We also had a look at the procurement part. And then based on that, what we did is, we have decided to first, achieve some kind of results and outcomes within the procurement department, within their operational excellence. At the same time, looking at their logistics, mapping the logistic. And the moment we started managing the logistic of inward and outward both, we realized that some of the products are unnecessarily roaming around from one point to one another, between the vendors itself for processing some of the things. And at the same time, the loading capacities of the vehicles and the transport at the same time, within the state, within the city, at the same time outside the state, and then outside the countries, the shipping and all. So we mapped everything, and then we have restructured their supply chain management in a way it doesn't reduces someone's pricing, at the same time doesn't what you can say, makes impact on the bottom line of someone else. So that is the key. So what we did is we first developed our own model. We implemented that under the logistic and procurement thing, and we came up with a great results. So whatever that value has added to the bottom line, we shared that outcome results to the suppliers and the vendors. So that formed a communication part. Look, we did some activities, we did some mapping, we used some standard to follow it, and we trained our leaders, to look at those things. And within 6 months, we implemented those. We shared those results with their suppliers and vendors, and then we started promoting in the brand promotion, how to do so we started sharing that very transparently. We started sharing the indicators or the numbers achieved. So we tried to disclose that not only to the consumers or the customers, but at the same time to the supply chain. So that is where the brand promotion came in picture. And that is where I'll suggest, I would like to recommend here that the supply chain management is all about knowledge sharing and value sharing. Otherwise, the people has a fear of losing business or impact on the bottom line. But the moment this kind of actions, we share and we help each other, instead of coming up with some only the, what you can say, plans and programs, let us come up with some, the knowledge sharing or value sharing supported by some incentive sharing, or at least the collaboration, because collaboration for, the resilient or moving for a better future. And that is where we have really made a success. So we form a cluster of five, the suppliers of that middle scale organization, and it has started giving result. And we form that cluster not only just to facilitate and just share the knowledge, but to train their leaders, to train their because the human capital is very, very important. And nowadays the leaders, basically maybe a dispatch leader or maybe inventory manager guy or maybe a procurement guy, their communication is very important. So we need to train them. So that is where the handholding is required, and that is where the knowledge sharing is required, and we need to give that, the actions to them. And that is where the brand promotion comes in picture. And that also helps the communication and the knowledge sharing, the building the relationship. Because through brand promotion, you already, address the issue of transparency and disclosure sharing. That is where you break the cake, you break the rock, because the collaboration is where the trust and credibility lies. And if you don't collaborate, then merely you are just cooperating. Okay, and you're at best you are just supporting for the sake. But that should not be the part, because in supply chain you have to connect all the dots, right? And that is where the resilience will happen. Otherwise, the supply chain is quite already, the technology has disrupted the supply chain. The COVID had disrupted the supply chain. The climate is really making impact on the supply chain. In that case, the organizations, the continuity of business and the growth are always, very dynamic in nature. So that's where the handholding for training the people is very, very important, because they are the heroes who are going to learn and do. So we don't want just a technical or managerial experts or guys. We want a leader who are a good learner and doer as well. So these are the new characteristics for, the supply chain manager should think of, and he should take along all the, the vendors and suppliers guys. So what we did is now, in that I forget to tell you this, the code of conduct part or the terms of reference, for the suppliers. So we have, because every 3 years they used to review it. Now it has, reduced to every half a yearly we do that. And that is what we have introduced. And we have given them not only some pointers or ratings or marks, but at the same time we are helping them through forming those cluster in achieving those numbers. And at the same time the owner of that organizations and assured that will not reduce the pricing. That's the beauty of it. So that is how it will, so that is where the transparency in that collaboration and starts comes, the trust comes in picture. So this is a great case study. So the relationship has started building, and then relationship has already, helped to overcome so many barriers, just the lack of communication, like, there are always some concerns, in the supply chain. And those concerns needs to be, eliminated right away. No need to, keep it long, and then topic of discussion in the hot room or war room. That doesn't helps anyone. So supply chain manager has got a big role. And of course the sustainability, if he applies the standard, or if he takes along the sustainability, the officer with him, then that becomes a smooth. Then the fourth, conversion. The conversion is very different thing. If I'm not getting a today's one job, then if someone in the supply chain, because the balancing the, the bottom and top line are important, no? By managing the logistic and procurement and other aspects, you are balancing you're, reducing the impact on the bottom line. But if once those are shared, those results, and what are the carbons the emissions you have shared, or what are the, what you can say, the social inclusiveness element on health and safety, or maybe some training needs and hours or comfort of the people, or the balance between the technology and human touch, what are the parameters or indicators has emerged. If you share that transparently, then that, helps to build the relationship, and then the conversion will be more faster. I'll just give you a second success story of the same company. We were nowhere into, because that's a automotive component manufacturer, and we were now in manufacturing the components or a system for a agriculture equipments. And now we somehow, when we shared such kind of case studies and these things, and what are the performance parameter at operational level or manufacturing, has been achieved by their team. Actually, it's their privilege to share these kind of things. So that's why I'm not sharing the numbers, but I'm just sharing the story, success story of it. So what we approached one of the American big customer, and then they offered us some, the prototype. We developed that entirely prototype within 3 months, and then we tested it. They liked it, and we have got a great order of that equipment, which is now being supplied from India for the next 3 years. So that is how the, the diversification also, happens, because you have to be ensuring the supply chain. You have to be member of that supply chain first, a great member, which reduces the impact on the environment, as well as at the same time helps on the social inclusiveness part. At the same time, on the top line side, this kind of disclosure, transparency helps you to go into someone else's supply chain, because it's a value sharing, right? And value sharing is very, very important. So I'm sorry, because I'm quite fast on speaking and sharing lot many things, but I'll skip some of the things for the question, and maybe from Bex or the participants. So this is what it is all about. So these 4 elements I am just just to recall and to put that into everyone's mind. The first one is, of course, very, very important. Communication is very important, and communicating with the numbers, not only with the customers, but at the same time to the suppliers and vendors. The second is uh, uh, the second part is, of course, the brand promotion part. That should cover up your transparency and disclosure, and some other elements are there. The third one is, of course, the relationship, because that relationship drives to that helps to overcome what are the, the nominal barriers, and that also helps to get the payments on time and real time. that is really very important part, because just in time and just in time delivery is very important for every for the supply, the management of the supply chain. And the fourth one is the conversion. That is very important. Then you will see that the growth, the business continuity and growth is good. So supply chain is very critical under that, and the collaboration, because without collaboration no one can achieve this. And the collaboration first for the knowledge sharing and then for the value sharing. So that's where I'll stop now. Bex, over to you.
Thank you, Chetan. That was so interesting to hear about the experiences and as you said, these two case studies from the organisation you've worked with. And I think the thing that jumps out to me there, particularly, was your point around the communication and the leadership, that sustainability and supply chain resilience it's not just a nice thing that the sustainability manager is responsible for. It's a huge part of business for your brand, for your bottom line, for your finances, and obviously for ultimately resilience. So thank you so much for sharing that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn to our second speaker today, Ranjit Sarma, and then I will put all the questions together and we'll discuss those at the end. For our audience, if you have questions, please continue to submit them via the app, and we will come to those after we've heard from Ranjit. So thank you very much for that, Chetan. And now, as I say, I'd like to introduce Ranjit. So he is the Head of Compliance and Corporate Social Responsibility for Plan A, India and Sri Lanka at Marks and Spencer's. There's a bit of a funny sound on the line. I'm not sure if that's someone has unmuted themselves, or perhaps it's from Ranjit's line. If someone could just double check that, that would be great. Okay, it has now stopped. Thank you. Not sure where that was from. So very briefly to introduce Ranjit, he is a supply chain risk mitigation specialist and also works in CSR, and he has done this for over a decade. He's worked in both the corporate and the development sectors and brings a unique perspective on the resolution and addressing of issues that are prevalent, particularly in the garment sector. He has also worked in a range of other sectors, including agriculture and food. Currently, for Marks and Spencer's, he is responsible for ethical sourcing, sustainability, and corporate social responsibility for the India and Sri Lanka regions. Thank you so much, Ranjit. Over to you.
Thank you, Bex. So is this issue still coming in? I think it was from my side. There was some confusion in terms of logging in. I actually clicked another link. However, just to say, I think I was just listening to Chetan, and I think he made a very interesting observation about the whole supply chain. Now, I'd like to go a little bit further and also clarify a bit in terms of what part of supply chain I represent. Because what happens is when you talk about the supply chain, it's a huge thing. I mean, whether you're talking about logistics, because even if you talk about compliance and logistics, it's part of the supply chain. If you are maybe sourcing for a brand, it's also part of the supply chain. So for example, if I have a counterpart who's looking at business, so essentially my job is more about risk mitigation and also ensuring that we have a sustainable supply chain. When I say sustainable, from a perspective of environment and social sustainability. And that's where I think the whole element of monitoring on one hand and the capacity building on the other comes into place. And I think this is where our relationship with Sedex lies, and a host of other similar organizations who are actually helping brands like us and many others to ensure that the supply chain is secure. And sustainability also ensures the whole thing about security of supply. That's a very, very important word, because what happens is, for example, I remember when I was in one of the other companies in the consultancy role, a very prominent brand who actually came up with their own code for the renewables, non-renewables, because they make products related to beauty, and then you have non-renewable material that goes into it. So they didn't wait for other global alliances, including ICEL and others, They came up with their own because they said, if we use the materials responsibly, that will actually ensure security of our supply in this area. So, but that actually came from an environmental perspective. But then with every environmental perspective, you have the social perspective also. So having said that, so I'll just quickly give a little viewpoint about some of the principles that we as a company look at, when we actually ensure to secure our, supply chain. And the first is actually having a robust global sourcing policy. I take care of India and Sri Lanka, but I think as a responsible brand, obviously, we are a UK-based brand and we have a sizable amount of footprint in India. I think we have gone to around 92 stores and still growing, and plus a significant online presence. So we have to ensure that that we secure and we actually source garments. Although we have not started food in India, but maybe not sure in the near future. But essentially, I'm looking over the sourcing of the garments, whether it is done in a ethical and responsible way, which means to ensure that that we have robust global sourcing principles. Actually, this then adds on to the whole discourse related to resilience, right? So that's one. The second thing is also, because being an international brand, there are international legislations, and each country has its own legislations, right? And maybe there are certain countries, for example, we are a UK-based country, so the modern day slavery, I mean, this legislation is applicable for any brand who are actually having or either operating out of UK or they are actually operating into UK. So how do you ensure that, because, and it's a very serious bit of legislation, because you are as a brand responsible till the very last end of the supply chain, which means cotton, for example, if I'm talking about garment. So that's the second part. And the third is, of course, can you change the world alone? Because it's essentially a shared supply base. If I'm sourcing from one, maybe vendor, because we don't own factories, the model is that we contract with different factories. So if we are sourcing from one, obviously there will be another brand B, which will also be sourcing from the same supply base. And there is the issue of economic leverage. So for example, if there is a supply chain issue and I'm just 2% in that factory, can I sort it on my own? The answer is no. So obviously the whole focus would be again on collaboration. So I'll be giving you examples where competing brands or competing businesses, they come together and collaborate in non-competitive space. So these are the three principles through which we are actually going. Bex, I have given an overview. So do I have some time to also maybe explain something about what our global sourcing principles are and some of the other stuff related to collaboration?
Sure. Yeah, you've got about 5 or 6 minutes, if that's okay.
Absolutely, fantastic. That's more than enough. Okay, so coming back to the global sourcing principles, and then also I'll actually maybe speak a bit about why we also looked at partnership with organizations like Sedex and SAC. So the idea is that when you talk about global sourcing principles, what we have done is we have actually taken the international standards, the ILO standards. So which includes your HR management systems and processes, labor standards, discrimination clauses, decent working conditions, health and safety, terms of employment, working hours and wages, advance of the modern slavery and forced labor. So these are the international standards. So what we did was we also maybe sync them with the local laws, because as a global company, we are working with Pakistan, we are working with Sri Lanka, we are sourcing from India, we are sourcing from Myanmar. So obviously there are country laws, but we have adopted that through our principles. So the essence of these principles is that we put the onus that let's jointly ensure that at least the first year supply chain we partner together. So where our monitoring mechanism and partnership comes in, it's in the first year. Whereas the responsibility of the supplier, our first tier supplier, is to again further manage its second tier. Similarly, at different levels, like I come back to the other thing related to collaborations. So where we, for example, we have partnered with organizations like Better Content Initiative, who we have partnered to actually look at implementing their principles at the cotton, because we are responsible all the way down to cotton, right? So that's one. Then the second part is putting on, and then with all this, the expectations which we have from our suppliers is that that they need to be familiarized themselves with the sourcing principles. They need to take steps to implement the action points set out. This may be proportionate to their business size and risk profile. And then, of course, be compliant with the transparency in supply chain public reporting requirement, which is set out in the Modern Day Slavery Act. Now, what happens is, as like a responsible retailer, we have also gone ahead and we have published our list of first-tier suppliers, and very soon we'll be publishing our second-tier suppliers also. So, which means, and then if you go to, and then the link is transparency.mns.com. If you go there, and then you see, you will see a list of all the suppliers, including food and clothing and home, and then the number of workers. If you go to each site, and then you click there, and you'll see details of number of male workers, number of female workers. So this is what we have done, again in the spirit of collaboration and also the transparency part. Then the other thing we also realize, because I think if you talk about the social compliance journey, this has been a long journey. I think I remember I started my career in 2015, where the focus was more on policing. You go there because there was very less knowledge about how do you monitor supply chain. But today, we have come up in a space where monitoring has actually evolved from maybe if you say pure monitoring against your code of conduct to a continuous improvement tool. That's where the partnership with SSC came in, and before that our partnership with Sedex came in, when we the whole purpose was that because you had so many audits. As I said, we had same supply base. So one auditor or one company supplier would face maybe up to 10 to 12 audits. So that actually also led to supplier fatigue. So we thought maybe instead of harassing them, maybe let's have a platform where we share. Of course, the onus was always on the supplier, that supplier would choose to share with who they would like to share the audit. So that was a pretty good arrangement, and then and then we still follow, and pretty happy with it. In fact, now the latest changes they have made in their systems in terms of improving the quality, that has been phenomenal. And lastly, of course, we have the collaboration with other brands. Of course, keeping in mind the antitrust issues, we do come together and discuss on issue. And in India specifically, we have also taken a further step, where we have also maybe worked in thematic areas like gender. So we partnered with the British High Commission, being a British company. They were wanting to do something especially during the COVID times. That led to rolling out of our gender equality program. We also partnered with the likes of the industry associations like Apparel Export Promotion Council. And now, in fact, we also thought of maybe reaching out to our suppliers, and also worked in the community. The list is pretty long. I think it will take more than 5 minutes to explain it all, but I have been able to give a crux. But yeah, maybe Bex can ask me some pointed questions, and I'm happy to answer them. Or if you have any questions. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ranjiv. That's really interesting to hear. And as the moderator of this, it's really interesting to hear that there are some similar themes and similar points between yourself and what Chetan's experience has been. But there's also, additional experiences and things that have been learned along the way. I think a key point you mentioned there was around regulation and the fact that responsible sourcing and sustainability is a journey. completely agree, and that's something that we talk to our members about a lot, is about how you will start in one place and you will grow over time and you will adapt. And legislation is obviously pushing that further. Legislation is saying to people it's not enough to just know what your factory is doing. You do need to know what's happening in your supply chain and tier 1, tier 2, etc. So yeah, really glad that that was sort of came up in your experience as well. We have a few minutes left, so I think a question I'd like to address to both of you is, and something that's come through from our members, is that collaboration, in particular, you know, choosing other organizations to work with. So perhaps not your individual suppliers, but perhaps bringing in other organizations to work with can be quite overwhelming. Sometimes it's not clear who to start with, or what issue to prioritize. You know, Ranjib, you mentioned within Marks and Spencer's, you've been able to focus on gender in certain areas, but for a lot of organizations at the beginning of their journey, it can be quite overwhelming to pick where they're starting, what they're starting with. Perhaps just a short answer from each of you of advice of where to start when thinking about collaboration. Ranjib, if we could start with you, then we'll go to Chetan. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think you know, it is important that, you know, there are so many players in this space, so it is very important to who to collaborate. I think as a company, you know, I think one of the interesting things we did was to actually partner with like, you know, with organizations with international standing. In our case, for example, it was Oxfam. So, you know, I think it's good to have, you know, a critical partner who is not actually out there to actually, like, you know, do your bidding, but also, like, you know, standing with you and also telling you exactly where you are going wrong. So there is a course correction. So, for example, a very interesting thing came up. In fact, last year, just before COVID, we opened our leather supply chain to Oxfam, and they actually went in there and they actually did a research, and actually the report came out. Of course, not naming because it was done in good faith, but we found a lot of issues which were actually not identified by regular monitoring mechanisms. So one of the things which we learned, and, you know, based on the recommendation, was how do we actually start, you know, capturing the worker voice directly. And that's where I think it went all to our, like, all the way to our ESG board, and we decided, yes, I think on one hand we monitor our supply chain, but also it's important because I think they are in a way a very important link of the supply chain, you know, at times, you know, so maybe directly hearing from them instead of a via media makes sense. So I'm happy to, like, let you know that we are participating in a pilot with Sedex, because Sedex has decided to do a little tweak in their, like, you know, maybe supply chain monitoring mechanism. And we were, like, the moment they came with us, like, a proposal, we said, yes, let's try that. Of course, we are trying out other stuff also, but again, you know, once we go through the process, we will learn, and then maybe, like, you know, find some solution and go, like, you know, way forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Chetan, the same question about how to start with collaboration, how to prioritize. I'll just give them a second to. We can't currently hear or see you, Chetan. Okay, not quite sure what's happened there. Hopefully he will reappear magically. So another question that we had is actually on legislation. So the question is, how have you seen legislation such as the UK Modern Slavery Act or the Australian Modern Slavery Act? How has that impacted you and your suppliers and your operations in India? As you've said, obviously it's legislation that's in another country, but it does have a global impact. So if you're able to give a short answer of how you've seen that impact you, that would be great.
I think, you know, when you talk about the legislation, obviously this was long overdue. You know, I think people were demanding it. For some reason, we did not have like, you know, proper legislation which would actually allow brands. But then, you know, if you are a responsible brand, you look at this element right from day one. In fact, you know, when I say Like, I used to work for another American company. We had the California Supply Chain Transparency Act. Modern day slavery actually goes one step further. So I think I would not say an impact, but it has actually formalized stuff. And also, I think the good news is recently even Tamil Nadu government actually passed the anti-trafficking bill, which is similar in line. So I mean, we are looking at the whole issue of forced labor right from day one. But yes, these things have become more streamlined. And I think now, because of that, we have created a toolkit, which we have actually supplied to our suppliers and others to conduct business responsibly. Chetan is also here.
Thank you for that. Yes, Chetan, you're back. Great. We have 2 minutes. So Chetan, if perhaps you'd like to answer the question, the first one about top tips for organizations who want to collaborate. If you have a short answer for that, that would be great.
Maybe, the best way to then say something is like the supply chain management, of course, like Ranjiv's, said, it's a very vast topic, and there are a lot of parameters and indicators, lot of, the code of conduct and lot of ratings exist. But, someone try to do some rationalism for it, the rational, making it very rational things, which can be used for anywhere. So many suppliers and vendors, they're floating like on a water. Everyone should be as the equal level, and water is formless and shapeless. Okay, so the supply chain management program should be also formless and shapeless. So that is what I'll put it into, very different way. And that is where the ESG, this matrix, there's some standards, the ratings, try to make it shapeless and the formless, at the same time giving the great direction. So that is what I would like to say. And there is of course this standards literally helps. Whatever standard you select, whether it is national or global, just apply it for you. At the same time, use it for your own suppliers, and then see you will see some really great magical things happening in real. And of course, when we are struggling with the environmental the concerns, and when we are struggling with the many inclusivity aspects, so I think that is where we need to align all our efforts. The economy element certainly gets balanced. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. We are at time, everybody, so thank you so much for tuning in today for this last panel session. We will now be handing back to Pritesh and the team to wrap up the day's event. And I'd just like to say thank you again so much to Chetan and to Ranjib for their fantastic contributions and conversation today. There's a few questions that have come through we've not been able to answer, but we will get back to those individuals directly after the conference has ended. Thank you very much again, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, Bex, and our panelists for that interesting presentation. Please now head over to the closing remark session where you will hear from Vishal Londe. So please select that join session. But thank you, and we'll stop the stream for this one now. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.